Welcome back to Bulletproof Mindset, your go-to podcast for health, fitness and entertainment. And in today's podcast, we are talking about 6 signs that you're not recovering and what to do about it. Recovery is a hot topic in the fitness space, and especially off the back of 2024, we got things like mouth tape, we got infrared saunas, we got cold plunges, all these crazy products coming into the supplement space. Do we need them? We'll find out in today's episode whether you do or whether you don't. Now, before we get into the episode, as we wrap up the year of 2024, I need your help. I want to try and reach 300 5-stars, and the only way to do that is by getting the support from you guys that tune in and listen to this podcast. So if you want to help us out, all you need to do is head over to Spotify, click on the 3 wee dots on the podcast page and click Rate Show and leave a 5-star rating. You can also subscribe on YouTube. These are completely free to do. It maybe takes less than 60 seconds. So if you like the stuff that I do here on the podcast, it's the best way to support me, and I would be very much appreciated if you do. One of the other ways you can support me is by sharing the episode on your Instagram. You can tag me at Bulletproof Mindset __, or you can tag you can tag me at Coach Crossar. As always, if you've got a question for me and you would like me to dive a bit deeper into a specific topic, or better yet, answer your specific question, then drop me a DM. Feel free to reach out to me. And with that being said, that's enough chit chat. Enjoy today's episode and enjoy the rest of your day. 6 signs that you're not recovering and what can you do about it. Recovery is probably the biggest hype to come out of 2024. Ice baths, cold plunges, infrared saunas, red light therapy. The list is genuinely endless. Cold tubs, I think, was probably the biggest thing we've seen here in the UK. I even got caught up in the hype and jumped in. I ordered a second council bin and converted that into an ice tub for a good 3 weeks before I realised this isn't really doing it for me. Now, power to you if these things are utilised in your own recovery training. But I want to do an actual episode on recovery, signs that you maybe aren't recovering as well as what you may think of, and what to do about it. What is the main basics that we need to cover before we utilise some of these things? I think if anyone is into their fitness, there's a good chance you have a smartwatch or a smart ring from Garmin, Whoop, all the way through to Apple, Fitbit, and probably a few other manufacturers that haven't yet came to light. Amazon, I think it's Amazon Fit or Amazon. I don't know if it is Amazon that are partnered with it. I think it is. There's the new Hyrox watch, and just things are exploding in this space. But what is the issue with all this new technology, all these new studies, all these new sort of hype topics? It's like the shiny object syndrome. You end up, are you overtraining? Well, let's be honest, if you have to ask yourself that question, there's a good chance you are. Putting that aside, we're going to talk about 6 signs that you're not recovering from your workouts and what to do about it. As we round up 2024, I think the biggest hype, or one of the biggest talking points in the fitness space just now is optimizing your recovery. Huberman has become a very go-to podcast for all us fitness coaches, and that's got us talking about the best things to do about sleep, buying mouth tape, cold plunges, saunas, infrared saunas, red light therapy. The list is genuinely endless. And that's not even to mention supplements. But what I wanted to do was do an episode specifically on talking about some signs that you may not have considered that are highlighting the fact that you're not recovering from your workouts. And what we need to do about it. What are the basics? Is mouth tape the answer? Do we need to invest in cold plunges, saunas? A bit of foreshadowing here. You absolutely don't. And not that you don't. You can definitely utilise some of these tools, but there is a basics and foundations that need to be followed first before we rely or utilise some of these other things. Now, you've heard me say this a lot in the podcast, but putting a plaster on a bullet wound isn't going to fix the bullet wound itself. And this is what some of these things may do. They might give us this instant reward, or it's like this shiny object syndrome. We see everybody else do it and it's like, yeah, I want to do that, instead of tackling the root causes. So let's get into some of these things. What is some signs that you may not be recovering from your workouts? Well, the first one might be an obvious one, maybe not so obvious for you guys out there, but no energy, lack of energy throughout the day, having to rely on caffeine, or just feeling like a straight up zombie. Now, this probably comes more from you guys who fall into the high rock space and have been hammering the WODs left, right and centre, especially for CrossFitters actually as well, where it is class after class after class and it's just a lot of intensity. It is not good to feel less energy. It's not a good feeling to feel low in energy after your workouts. That's actually the reverse of what you should feel. You should feel buzzing from your workouts. You should actually have more energy when you finish your workout. And another thing I often say in the podcast is just because you can handle it doesn't mean you should. So this whole beast mode, putting your all into these workouts, there's times and places for that, but doing that and maxing out on all your lifts, all your PB times, try to PB a run every time or whether you're running or lifting weights, it's going to fry your central nervous system, and this in result is going to return you with low energy levels. So maybe a controversial one, but you should have more energy when you finish your workout, not have less of it within reason. And that leads nicely on to the next point. What's worse than leg day? Well, it's a leg day that lasts 4 days, and although this is a meme in the fitness space, it is probably a very, very, very good sign that you're overtraining. If your DOMS, as this is referred to, delayed onset muscle soreness, if your DOMS lasts all the way through until your next leg day, you are doing it wrong. I don't care how hard you can train, how beast mode your workout is, it's fucking stupid to do so, right? So scale it back. I would say, I mean, a good feeling if you're not a novice lifter, this is maybe the category of people this doesn't apply to. Being new to the gym, you can expect a lot of soreness because you've literally done nothing, and by working out a little bit, then you can experience a good bit of soreness because your body's trying to adapt to that. In this example, if you are consistently working out, you can expect a little bit of muscle soreness, but that doesn't define a good workout. If your muscle soreness exceeds any more than 2 days, there is 99.99999% chance that workout that you've done is way too much volume from what you should be doing. Now, there is a part to this that this could be down to some other factors of recovering, but this is a sign that your body's not recovering from the workouts or the volume or the exercise activity that you're doing. Now, this will be different if you're competing in something, right? And this is something that's way overlooked. So if you go to do a park run, you go to do a high rocks race, or you just go to do a lifting competition, whatever it may be, you can expect probably a little more soreness for the next couple of days than what you normally would expect. Why? Because you probably pushed your maximum intensity throughout that lift. And this goes back to my previous point. We shouldn't be applying 100% output through every lift that we make, contrary to what you see online. And anyone that is doing this, I would argue that they're on probably either one part of this, they have all these recovery methods dialed into a T, which we'll talk about in a sec, or two, they're on performance enhancements, which allows them to push the barrier of overtraining. Now, if you don't fall into that category, then scale it back a little bit and stop comparing yourself to the top 1%. These people who maybe do this for a career, maybe they do it because it's their job and they want to be the top 1%, so they're going to utilise PEDs and all the extra recovery methods that they absolutely can to be the best in the sport, then so be it. But if that doesn't you and you just want to do it because you want to live a healthy lifestyle, you want to feel strong, you want to be confident, and you don't care about being the top of the top, but you want to be better than normal, then you don't need to be doing all this sort of stuff. Okay, point number 3 that you're not recovering from your workouts is that you have your grumpy pants on. Let's say you walk into the gym in prime time and you start throwing a hissy fit. There's too many people in here. So such and such is on bicep curling in the squat rack, which arguably is bang out of order, but that doesn't give you the right to be a wee grumpy pants about it. Now, grumpiness, being short with everyone, it is a telltale sign that you are overtrained, you're overworked, and you're not recovering from whatever's going on in your life at this point. So ask yourself, do you find yourself that just being like, and here's another point actually I'll make on this. People use this as a cop-out. oh, I'm just cynical, oh, I'm just a negative person. No, you're not. Like, that's not an excuse, and you shouldn't want to be that type of person, because you are miserable to be around. And the longer you stay in that as a grumpus or cynical person or negative person, the less people there's going to be wanting to spend time with you, because it's so fucking energy sucking that you generally don't want to spend time with these people. And you can all think of one person who comes to mind that you spent time with in the last 6 months that you're like, yeah man, they just sucked the life out of me. Okay, point number 4 that you're not recovering from your workouts. You're struggling to PR. This could be benching, it could be squatting, it could be deadlifting, it might be a run time, it might be a split time. It generally is anything. Obviously PRs are all very, even though they're objective markers, they're subjective to what you're chasing. It could be a bicep curl, could be a hip thrust. However, I would argue that they mean less than your big compound lifts. Now, with that being said, you're struggling to see the numbers go up, so the volume increasing, whether that's an extra rep, an extra weight, an extra set. Like, as I say, the list is generally endless, but you are digging into a hole every time you try and pursue this PR. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, this shouldn't be something that you're doing every week. But if your training program's very good, then you'll be peaking towards a quote-unquote PR week. But in that PR week, you might find that you're just getting weaker. Again, this is a massive red flag, or a massive flag in general of your body trying to tell you that we need more recovery, which we're going to come into in a little sec. The second last point here is injuries, right? Now, injuries in the sense of, it doesn't have to be a tear, a breakage, or an actual pull. It can generally just be a niggle, this kind of like wear and tear in your joints. Now, if you've been lifting weights and you've fell into the powerlifting world, or fell into just lifting heavier 3, 5, 6 rep maxes for a long period of time and not taking any days off, you'll know what I mean when I say wear and tear on your joints. Resistance training, I speak time and time again in this podcast, is such a vital part of your longevity, your quality of life, your overall strength. And with that being said, strengthening your muscles and joints through that process. But there is a fine line with overdoing it and not recovering from those workouts that becomes impactful to your joints. And that's where you see a lot of poor, I would actually come down to say, is poor programming alongside poor recovery. And again, programming is one of the points of recovering correctly from your workouts and not just oversending it. But the niggles that just don't go away, these little aches and pains that you're feeling throughout your body, is a byproduct of recovery. And if you're not recovering well, then that needs to be addressed, or those niggles, aches and pains are going to lead to bigger problems. That's going to be so heartbreaking to you once it becomes too late that you can't do the thing that you love to do. Okay, and the last point, which leads nicely onto the first point of what you can do about it, is sleep. Have you heard of it? Well, if you're lying awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, sleep insomnia, you're struggling to get to sleep at night, then guess what? It's another sign that you potentially could be overtraining. Now, all of these things, there can be other factors that play into it, but a good chance, a good proportion of this can come from your training and overdoing it. Now, sleep has to be one of the foundational pillars when it comes to the most optimal recovery method. But if you, it's like the chicken and the egg. What came? Sound like a fucking chicken there. What comes first? What is the best thing to tackle? If you can't sleep, it's because you're overtraining. Well, that needs to be scaled back so you can sleep properly. Now, your body being so centrally fried from the overtraining does keep you awake at night. It can be causes why your sleep's getting interrupted, your soreness, your from the workouts you're doing is waking you up during the night. You're not able to get into that full REM sleep cycle, that deep sleep, because you are doing too much. And as I said earlier in this podcast, mouth tape, saunas, cold plunges, you generally can't you can't out-train or foam roll your way out or cold plunge your way to sleeping better. Sleep is the foundation pillar, and if that's been interrupted, then you can bet everything else is going to be thrown off. So what do we do about it? What would be the core pillars to define the most optimal recovery routine? Well, I hate to break it to you, none of this is going to include cold plunges, saunas, ice baths, mouth tape, supplements. The foundational pillars that we need to address is the big rocks, the big things that's going to make the biggest impact to your improvements. So you can wear all the mouth tape in the world, you can take all the ice baths in the world that you want, but if you're not sleeping well and you're not doing some of the next things that we're going to cover off, then it does not matter. So let's get into it. So as I said, sleep is up there with the most important pillar or big rock that we need to tackle. What is the best sleep schedule? Well, you'll see arguments out there for anywhere from 7 to 9 hours, but ultimately you need to kind of carve your own journey out. If you've got kids, then that's going to be interrupted. So you're going to need to figure out what your most optimal sleep pattern is around that. If you don't have kids, then look, you might be a wee bit more luxurious, should I say, with what options are available to you. Now, if anything you take away from this part, it's the consistency of following a sleep schedule. So if you have the luxury of not being, my brother's just got a new puppy and his sleep's interrupted through the night. And I bet you when he kind of looks back to life just last week, he'll be like, man, I took that sleep for granted. And a lot of us do probably when we have kids. We've recognise, like, man, life wasn't actually that hard. It's like your body always adapts to the stresses and you make it work, don't you? But sleep schedule is one of the most crucial things I would say I've done over the past couple of years when it's coming to my recovery and just ability to go after certain things, whether it comes to business or training, right? And that sleep schedule is waking up or trying to get up on the first alarm and going to bed roughly within the same hour. So usually I like my alarm on my phone will go off at anywhere from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, and at night time the alarm sends me to bed at anywhere between 9 and 10. There's usually the windows that I operate on. Now, being a wee bit more relaxed than that, I encourage you all to take on board the life curveballs that come your way. And it's not even that it's a curveball, it's just there is enjoyment things that come out of it, whether you go on holiday or you go away for a weekend. These are obviously times that the routine's going to be changed up a little bit, so embrace it, get on board with it, but for majority of the time stick to your routine. Now, things that you can do before bed: stay away from scrolling on your phone, put your phone in the hall, introduce a reading hour or listening to some sort of quiet music, turn off all bright lights, wear blue blocking glasses. These are all things that can come into play to help optimize your sleep recovery. But I didn't want to make this just based purely on sleep, because I think most of us know that if we get better night's sleep, then things can be a lot better on our day-to-day life. Sleep is where we grow our muscle, it's where we reduce our body fat, it's where our hormones regulate itself, it's where we get our mental kind of stimulus from. So understanding that this is the biggest pillar to change, there's a good chance to put a lot of effort into trying to fix that. The best thing you can do, as I said, being very consistent with your wake up and go to bed time. Track a rough, like what I would say about trackers, actually, don't get so caught up on the individual data. So if you track last night's sleep, oh my God, it's 6 hours, that's terrible. The night after, 8 hours, like don't be so dogmatic or narrow viewed on a couple of days worth of data. Try and get trends. Trends is a better approach to try and mitigate and understand, why was my sleep impacted by that day? And sleep is usually impacted by a number of factors. Did you stay up a bit later? Did you watch TV maybe right up until you were supposed to go to bed? Were you binging your favourite YouTube podcast like this? Then you need to factor all these things in. And as we go into the next point, this is another factor that can affect this. As we said, we're already talked about overtraining, and that overtraining stimulus keeping us awake. So other areas of your life need to be scaled back. Sometimes it's just a lot going on. Family fallouts, friendship fallouts, business stresses, career stresses, not getting the promotion you wanted, getting the promotion you wanted. If you're a manager in work, you have to sack someone, or you have to have a disciplinary, you have to have a difficult conversation with someone. These are all things that can keep us up. And the beauty of all this is the best way you can manage your recovery and the most optimal recovery is how you manage those stresses. So remember, workouts can be a stress relief, but it's also creating stress in that environment. Okay, so that's enough for sleep. Let's come on to the next one, which is the overtraining, right? Training in general is one of the most overlooked things for recovery. The no days off camp, the beast mode camp, like, is so, I don't know, like, I still think is In fact, I think it's becoming even more of a cool thing to do. Like, look at me doing my double training days. Look at me training 7 times a week. It's just, if I take a day off, then I'm going to fall backwards. Like, it's such a egotistical way of looking at things. So drop the ego and listen to your body, because most likely the 6 points that I mentioned at the start of the episode, where you can't hit PRs, your body's in niggles, aches and pains, you're not sleeping well, all these things can be affected because your programming isn't correctly. And on the other side of things, not being able to gauge or understand your volume is a massive thing. So when we look at training, when we look at phases of training, different cycles that we do, cycles in the sense of training, not steroids, guys, right? Chill out. But we factor in a thing called your MRV. Now, your MRV stands for your maximal recovery volume, and it can be very hard to measure if you're not following a program. It can be, in fact, it can be very hard to measure just overall, but if you're following a lifting weights program, it's usually the total volume that you've given to that week. Now, there's other factors that come into play, as I said, that you can't necessarily measure, like how many hours sleep did you have, what sort of stresses have you got coming on from the workplace, how do you handle those stresses, etc. But putting all that to aside, the more and more you train, the better and better you get at this. So for someone that's got 10 years of training under their belt in a lifting weights environment, deadlifting, squatting, benching, overhead pressing, that person compared to someone with 1 year of lifting is going to have a higher tolerance to their MRV, their maximal recovery volume, the volume that it takes for them to get stimulus, to get growth, to get improvements, and also where they draw the line and work up to that threshold and then scale back. An example I'll use just now is the whole running side of things, okay? So when I started running, I couldn't run 10k. I had shin splints. I just felt uncomfortable. I had no technique. I had no threshold at all when it came to my maximal recovery volume. So what did I do? Did I run a 10k? No. I ran 1 lap of the track. And as I ran 1 lap, I went, can I run 2? Can I run 3? Can I run 4? Until I could get 1k. Then it was 3k. Then it was 5k. And now I can run longer periods of time. I get no aspirations to run any longer than 10k, maybe a half marathon just to box it off, maybe a marathon, but time will tell with that. I don't want to lose too much muscle mass. But that is an example of me looking at my MRV, my maximum recovery volume, is establishing a threshold, working close to that threshold, and then changing up the programming to look at other things. So as I was running, I'm using for a lap of the track as an example, it most likely was running upwards of a 5k. The 5k was hard, so then I scaled it back to a 1k, a 2k, a 3k, running for 15 minutes, running for 20 minutes, being able to stay on my feet at a slower pace, working in these faster paces. This is how programming is so vital. Now, that's me talking about running, and I ain't a running coach. I am coaching a few clients when it comes to their running capabilities, but I'm nowhere near any of these elite trainers. On the other side of things, when it comes to strength training, when it comes to programming for building muscle, building strength, becoming more confident, healthier and strong, I would consider myself as an elite programmer in that category. I've experienced 15 to 20 years of different programming, challenging my own programming and working with other coaches, and through that experience I make a strong guess and a strong estimate to where people's MRV status is, where their threshold sits at, how to change up the phases, what different exercises to bring into play, what rep ranges to do, what synopsis that I put on the exercises, for example, slow and controlled reps, pauses at the bottom, how to utilise all these training methods to apply it to your training program. Now, with that being said, every person is going to be different with this, and this is where you need to establish where yours are at. Now, if you're someone who doesn't follow a program, this is near impossible to measure and manage, okay? So, doesn't matter how much you foam roll, it doesn't matter how much mouth tape you have for the year, it doesn't matter what supplements you take, how many ice baths, sound Mike Tyson, ice baths that you do, what saunas you do. If you are not measuring your volume, then again, you could get away by utilising these other things. But one of the bigger rocks to tackle is understanding the volume that you're doing and slowly increasing it as the weeks go on. Taking a deload week, or taking a week where you change up the phase. You're not staying in that heavy rep range for too long, or equally, you're not staying in that 8 to 12 rep range for too long, or doing the same exercises for too long, because by as your body adapts to it and it's not being challenged in other planes of motions or other training methods or other training modalities, then that's where your body can break down and feel these aches and pains. So if you're not following a program, then I have an exciting thing coming up in December where I'm going to relaunch the whole Bulletproof coaching programs. And these are programs only. So these are probably, in fact, they are for you, those of you who are very confident of working out in the gym. There is no one-to-one coaching, but as the methods and principles that I've learned over the years. The first one that I'll be launching is going to be centered around gaining strength, gaining confidence in the compound lifts, and more importantly, building a stronger and healthier body. But you'll have to wait for that because it'll be 2 episodes away. Okay, next one, let's talk about the category of nutrition. If you are fixated on performance, and performance can be your run time, your high rocks time, your CrossFit time, your lifts, the 3 rep maxes, 5 rep maxes, 10 rep maxes, this almost becomes impossible to do in a calorie deficit, okay? So remember that as you take calories away from your body, as you take energy away from your body, and your output is required to hit a personal best, without that fuel, it's like not a double negative, but it's like 2 negative responses going against you. So you might have been 2% off, but by taking the calories away, then that 2% becomes 10% because nutrition is such a key component when it comes to a recovery. So calorie deficit, obviously if you're in a fat loss phase and all these sort of things, that does need to take place. But that's where you need to ask yourself, is your recovery being affected because you're eating so little food? And if it is, then it's a better strategy to bump up your calories for a little period of time, because then that can help with your sleep. That can then help with your recovery, which means you can give a bit more to your training sessions, which in return can help you build more muscle, more strength. Then full circle back to making it easier to go into calorie deficit in 3 or 4 months' time. Now, that's where I'm always a big believer of not rushing the process, because breaking these strategies down makes it a wee bit better to understand and play the longer game with it, because you can lose, you've probably proven that you can lose fat in a 6-week period of time or a 12-week period of time, but why not focus on these other methods or these other training goals to then allow yourself to lose the fat and keep it off for longer periods of time, if not forever. Now, what I will say with nutrition, because it ties into the sleep side of things, eating close to bedtime can mess with your sleep. I'll pull my hands up here. I eat very, very close to bedtime, just the nature of the day-to-day routine that I'm in. I eat when I wake up first thing in the morning. Some studies will show that it's better to fast for an hour or 2, but you need to work out your own journey with this. But I definitely experiment with, if you're feeling that your sleep is disrupted throughout the night, then eating a bunch of food and then lying horizontally for that food to go through your digestive system may not be a good idea. So factor in like a 10-15 minute walk after you have a meal, and that's going to help the digestion process and help you get into that kind of resting state without screens, by the way. Now, nutrition, calorie deficit, as I said, too close to sleep. The last thing I'll say, which I guess comes under the nutrition window, pre-workout, caffeine, cans of Monster. Let's not do it, guys, right? Having caffeine after 2 o'clock, probably what to experiment with not doing if you feel that your sleep's rubbish, because as we said, the main pillar that's going to move the needle forward the most is going to be optimizing the sleep, and comparing that with good training programming, comparing that with a good nutrition protocol is the 3 key rocks, or the 3 main players when it comes to optimizing your recovery and having the best recovery possible to give the best performance or the best training ability towards whatever your goals are. Now, out with that, if you look at nutrition as a whole, we want to be fueling our body with good food, right? And I'll classify good food as single ingredient foods for a majority, 70 to 80%. Single ingredient foods would be things that are whole in nature. So eggs, meats, chicken, like things that don't have a lot of process going into them. Now, I would even categorize the yogurt, even though there's some sort of processing going on with that, but try and keep away from those ultra like processed types of food. Having them all the time it doesn't make you feel good, right? And some people think they feel great on these things, but I would argue that they don't know what good feels like because they've never experienced disciplining themselves for a week or two to see what the possible is. And every client that I get on board that maybe cuts out the takeaways, and that's not because I tell them to, it just becomes the natural order of things as they start eating these wholer foods. They start to prefer that more. And then when they do have this urge or they have the impulse to like maybe being a wee bit more stressful in life, it's like, yeah, we'll just order a chippy tonight, or we'll just order a Chinese. They get that in and then they have it and they're like, wow, I feel really shit. Now, off the back of this, I've not mentioned things like biofeedback or other elements of your recognising that your recovery is off, like your digestion, your stress, your mood, your libido. These are all things that have massive, massive factors. Like for women, like if you have inconsistent periods, then there's a hormonal imbalance, and within a hormonal imbalance there is a good chance that the overtraining part can play into that. Same with guys. If you don't wake up with an erection, if you don't wake up with morning wood on a regular basis, then there's something not going on right with our testosterone. Now that can be multiple factors. It can be the nutrition, it can be the overtraining, the lack of sleep, and it can also be this next point where there is too much alcohol consumption coming into the mix, because believe it or not, it messes with your brain chemistry, messes with your hormone over longer periods of time. So it can be very, I'm not saying like you need to quit alcohol completely, but the consumption of it needs to be reduced to help you scale up these other areas. Now, each to your own when it comes to what you decide to do when it comes to alcohol. The best piece of advice I can give you is minimize, don't demonize. And this goes the same for nutrition. So obviously nutrition, alcohol, caffeine, they can all fall under a very similar category, although have different aspects and needs for what we do in our day-to-day life. But demonizing all these things is not a good thing either. Saying bad foods, ultra processed food's bad, having a chippy's bad, having a Chinese is bad, drinking alcohol is bad. It just becomes this sort of demonization, and with the demonization, if it's a thing, like alcohol's very widely accepted in social settings, so there's a good chance when you're all out with your friends and you have a drink, you're going to have one anyway, and then you've demonized this thing. There's then a misalignment with the kind of pact that you made with yourself, and not to mention then the guilt that comes with that as well. So it just becomes this downward spiral of depressive state and higher anxiety for no reason whatsoever. So if it's something that you really want to take serious, then just minimize it. Like, as I said, 70% of improvements is a large improvement to make. I think, what's the pass marks in some of these exams or university courses? It's like 67%, 65%. So 70%, if you make that marginal improvement in some of these things or all of these things, then you're probably going to see massive improvements when it comes to your training goals or whatever it is that you're pursuing. So minimize, do not demonize. Now, the last point I'll say on this is take the day off, right? I mentioned it earlier, quieting that fucking ego. The no days off mentality was a thing that we saw C.T. Fletcher do back in the day and Ronnie Coleman. And yes, it's cool to watch, but we're literally watching the top 0.1% of people. And it's even harder to see, or it's even harder to avoid it in today's world, because we see the top level athletes, we get to see their day in the life, we get to see how their day's structured. And I would argue that the top level athletes of any sport that you're maybe attracted to, and maybe you're doing a bit of the training, arguably aren't the more holistically healthiest, right? And that's fine, right? It's fine to dip your toe into these different modalities, but if you're not going to compete to be the top level athlete or put in a decent time at that, then maybe ask yourself, is it worth pursuing? Because there's a lot of sacrifices that has to come with them as well. And when you're comparing to these guys, like you training 7 days a week and them training 6, you start to realise that a lot of people you're following have this facade that they put on for Instagram. It's the, here's what my best life looks like, instead of going, here, like, I need to take a day off, I need to work on my mobility. Now, if you struggle with days off, then there's maybe a mental component to this that you may have to dive deeper into. And that mental component generally could come down to you having some deep-rooted addiction to why you're working out. And you might not like where the answer to where that goes. So take your days off, but your days off doesn't have to be just lying on a couch. Your days off can be changing up the scenery, going out a walk, like bolster it onto a social occasion, do a hill climb, go to like a more premium gym where you can have the pool, the sauna, the spa area. Like, your days off don't have to be like lying like a vegetable and just not moving for a whole day. Like, you can move, and a great day off can be an actual mobility routine, something that isn't as impactful to what your training's been like. So there is your 5 main pillars, or let's call these the 3 big rocks to recovery. The other things that we can then start to tackle is the type of training that you're doing. If you are doing double day training because you're trying to become an elite level runner, or you're trying to PB a time, or you're trying to PB a high rocks, whatever it may be, you're going into a sport and a competing category. And when you compete in something, there has to be, I guess, a little bit more dedication and a little bit more sacrifice to what the most optimal way is to recover. But as I said earlier, these are all subjective things, and the most optimal way is going to be what you deem the best fit for you. So I hate cold plunges. Try to get into them. Now, I know my mentality, I could fight them a little bit more, but equally getting up and going a run in the morning, I get more reward from doing that mentally than I do anything else. And the same goes for those of you who don't do high rocks. You get the same reward from just running or just working out. So each to their own in your category. But when you break this down, signs that you're not recovering fall into the 3 categories, which is your physical signs. So you get fatigue, your performance isn't increasing, you got really sore muscles for days on end, and another one actually didn't even see here, a weakened immune system. I was talking to Adam, who was on the podcast recently, a strength and conditioning coach for the high level athletes in the fighting space and football space. And your immune system breaking down, getting sick, getting colds a lot easier when you might be considered as someone who never really got colds. A weakened immune system, you can see one of the reasons is your body going, there, we are fried. We need to recover, and we're not recovering efficiently. The other side of things is also the mental and emotional side of things, which is, I wouldn't say discipline, I'd say like lack of motivation, because you're so beat up. The kind of mood swings and the irritability of things that can come along with this. As I mentioned, sleep, and obviously stress levels just all over the place. And then, as I mentioned there, the biological signs here are your hormonal variabilities. So for women, maybe inconsistent periods, and for men, inconsistent erections. Like, it simply comes down to that. The other factors that you mentioned there is, if you do wear a watch, then like your HRV status is a good one to pay attention to. That being or that decreasing pretty rapidly is a sign that your body's not able to handle whatever it is that's going on. And that's going to happen after a hard training day, or that's going to happen after a hard competing session. But that's why you can only give it your all once, or in a short space of time. You can only do it a handful of times. Now, with all that being said, your main key points is your sleep, your training program, and your nutrition. They're going to make the biggest benefits to what you do, and of course taking the rest days. So with that being said, there's other things that we did skip over, and I would say honourable mentions. Supplements can have an element that can unlock better sleep, can help with the nutrition side of things, but as I'm saying there, they are byproducts of the supplements themselves. So it's not the supplements as a big pillar. Those supplements just help move the needle in the biggest categories, which is your sleep, your nutrition, and your programming. So that wraps up the episode. I want to hear from you though. For you who feel that you get your recovery pretty well, I want you to comment below this. What's some things that you do that I may have missed? Or what's some things that you do that I mentioned, and give us your own testimonial to how that's worked for you. If you find that you are someone who is now kind of realised that they are overtraining and they aren't recovering as best as they thought they were, I want to hear from you. Let us know. If you get any questions what I've done on this podcast, then please reach out to me on Instagram at Coach Crossar. You can also message the podcast page as well at Bulletproof Mindset __. And with that being said, that wraps up today's episode. I will see you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful day.